ever stop to think about this idea that we are probably living in the most comfortable era of sales and sales travel of all time? A few weeks ago, I was on a travel binge. A few things happened that caused me to have to fly on an airline I don't normally fly with, book it last minute, which meant I was back row middle right against the lav. I, like a dummy, went and tweeted about it in a moment of weakness, and some troll lit me up. And as it turns out, the troll was probably right. In today's episode number 49, let's talk about what it must have been like to be a traveling salesperson in the mid-1800s. Yeah, we are going to go all the way back there. I got stories, and they're amazing. So buckle up. Here we go. Episode number 49.
There is nothing new in the world of sales except for the history you do not know. Welcome to the Sales History Podcast, bringing the brilliant and sometimes strange minds, methods, and ideas from the sales profession's past with applications to today. Here is your host, the best-selling author of 2 books, with a third coming in January of 2026. CSP speaker, trainer, and nerd, Todd Caponi.
Okay, so yes, I got lit up by a troll, and in hindsight, he was probably right. I had gone on a binge where I was on 6 different flights in just a couple of days, and due to an unforeseen situation one of the clients experienced, I had to suddenly change destinations. And so the only flight I could get was on an airline I had no status with, which combined with it being last minute meant, yes, backseat, middle, up against the loudly flushing lav. And I was upset about it. I went on Twitter and just said, oh, here I go, middle seat, third row in the back. And this person lit me up with a tweet that said, the horror, wah, with a bunch of crying emojis. And at first I was like, what a jerk. But then I read an interview with a salesperson in a 1923 article. As of that year, this individual telling the story was known as Uncle Charlie, but his name was Charlie Terry. He had been a traveling salesperson for 64 years in 1923, all right? At the time of the interview, he was 87 years old. Now, while we may complain about selling environments today, in what is actually obvious when thinking about it, we are living in the most comfortable period of selling of all time. Think about it, the travel, the illness, the wars, the economy, the inability to communicate or even make simple plans. Something as simple as not having any means to know what to expect in terms of the weather. Reading Charlie Terry's story made me feel like the biggest wimp on the planet. Now, there's a guy, Charlie Roy Vance, who's a writer for the Times Democrat newspaper out of Arkansas in 1923. There's a couple of quotes from him, but I'll start with this one that really tells you what selling was truly about back then. The quote is this: "The salesman sacrifices his love of his home and, to be plainer, sells his life for a living. He is tipping bellhops and porters for every little favor. He pays more for his meals and lodging than any other class of men in existence." With that in mind, here's Uncle Charlie's story. As a child, Charlie lived south of Milwaukee in Wisconsin, in an area that's now called Caledonia. His father was persuaded to move to Chicago. His parents moved, but for some reason not explained, they left Charlie to live with a doctor. Charlie had chores to do to pay for his room and schooling and food. Now, Charlie was 13 years old and really missed his family, so he started collecting pennies. He accumulated a whopping 80 cents, which I don't know how much that is today, but on December 23rd of 1849, again, that's 1849, he snuck out of the window into a snowdrift with his small amount of clothing and started traveling. He made his way to nearby Racine, Wisconsin, where he spent some of that money on breakfast. Then he kept walking, making his way to Kenosha that day. Now, Kenosha is essentially right over the border north of Chicago into Wisconsin, over the Illinois-Wisconsin border. He found someone to take him in for the night, provided him with dinner, a bed, a breakfast, and the next morning he kept walking. While he had no idea where his parents lived, he found a policeman who helped him find his parents' home in Chicago. And Charlie arrived just after dark on Christmas Eve. He snuck in as his parents had friends over. They were playing a game called Snapdragon. Now, get this. Apparently, that involved a bowl of brandy and raisins, where the brandy was set on fire. Apparently, what you had to do is try to snatch a raisin from the burning bowl. Like, it sounds brilliant, but I digress. The reunion was joyous, but he was only able to stay for 3 years. Cholera broke out in 1852, and many people were dying. He was sent away again, this time out to the western suburbs of Chicago, Aurora, Illinois, to be specific. Charlie knew how to travel, and he made that his profession. Beginning in November of 1859, he started out on the road as a salesperson, first buying and reselling furs, but he was traveling on horseback. Now, keep in mind, this was before cars, before airplanes. Even railroads weren't yet extended far enough to be a viable travel option. His next job was selling subscriptions to a local newspaper. Then he moved on to sell insurance policies for a company you may have heard of still today, Aetna. In 1861, the American Civil War broke out, and soon after, he was enlisted into the military. Now, Uncle Charlie didn't last long, suffering severe sunstroke, which took him years to recover from, resulting in an honorable discharge. But Charlie, coming out of that, went right back to selling insurance, traveling throughout Illinois and Missouri. Most of his time was spent on horseback under what would be considered pioneer-type conditions. His favorite story to tell encapsulates what selling must have truly been like at that time. He and another salesperson were traveling through the backwoods of Farmington, Missouri. They had planned to stop for the night, but their meetings ended early, so they decided to press on and hoped they'd be able to find a place to stay. It was November. It was cold. It started to rain. That, combined with the wind, meant it was time to find shelter, a meal, and a place to sleep. At the time, there was an order in Missouri to all residents to not take anyone in unless they were known to be on the Union side of the war. Uncle Charlie was on the Union side, but they had no way to prove it. So any farmers they asked to let them in for the night turned them away. Finally, they found a place. It was a rough log cabin where a couple was willing to take them in. The couple and the cabin itself were filthy. The woman of the house put together something to eat for the two salespeople. Charlie explains that there were 2 yellow bowls on the table for them filled with what he called rancid grease. One had a slab of bacon fat, and in another, fried eggs swam in their bath of hot lard. Large quantities of the same greasy ingredient had plainly gone into the overgrown and overweight biscuits. That's a quote. The woman poured them both a cup of what he called so-called coffee. Charlie inquired if she had milk for the coffee, and she grabbed the coffee, and I'm inferring here from the language, she squirted the milk directly from a cow. She handed the cup back to Charlie, who passed it directly on to his companion, responding, "I'll just take mine black." That's perfect. That's fantastic. Now, the two were provided beds, which were in the same room and pressed right up against the farmers' beds themselves. So they all slept in the same room and within a few feet of one another. Exhausted and hungry, the two salespeople fell asleep quickly. However, the farmers woke them up at 4 a.m. and apparently weren't shy about it, and the two sales guys went on their way. Charlie's career journey was discussed further throughout the interview. He moved to Kansas to sell sewing machines in the 1870s. He sold for Haydock Brothers Carriage Company starting in 1883. Then he moved back to Iowa to work for another carriage company in 1901. Eventually, he moved on to sell as a field representative for Implement and Tractor Trade Journal, so a magazine, in 1910, and stayed with that job up until the time of the article, which was 1923. Uncle Charlie's story is not unique. It was quite a life for him and a calling for the many, many like him. Because as Charles Roy Vance wrote, quote, "He must succeed if the wheels of the great factories and manufactories keep turning. Upon the salesman depends the payroll of the laborer, the shop girl, the office force, and the man must make good if the great wheels of commerce run smoothly." Now, Charles Roy Vance was a traveling salesperson himself, having, quote, traveled over 14 states on horseback, in a buggy, hack, wagon, ferry boats, skiffs, freight trains, log trains, passenger trains, bicycles, automobiles, Fords, and have walked some. So, in the end, next time I'll take my back middle seat and I will appreciate all that we have today. And I think so often we should take a step back and realize that life is pretty good. I had to travel under 1,000 miles that day, and I did it on a nice, comfortable, cushioned seat, 35,000 feet above the ground. I had somebody serving me a drink. It was glorious in hindsight. So, what do you think? Are we living in the most comfortable selling era of all time? And is it only going to get more comfortable? I believe that to be the case. Let's appreciate that. And as always, a couple of things. First of all, I don't know if you saw the announcement, but I am publishing a third book. It is called 4 Levers Negotiating. It'll be out on January 27th, 2026. Pre-order is available anywhere that you buy books. Appreciate your support there. And in terms of the podcast, as always, I so appreciate you listening in. Please share it if you liked it. Let other people know. Leave a review if you can. And I'm always grateful for the ideas and things that you want to learn about from sales histories past. If I can be of service to any of that, please let me know. So again, until next time, thanks again.